Now then, it seems not all life was brought to a halt by the lockdown. Despite the restrictions, Vanessa O'Brien's become the first woman to reach the world's highest and lowest points. Having reached the summit of Mount Everest in 2012, last week she completed a submersible dive to the bottom of the deepest point of the Pacific Ocean. A very good morning to you, Vanessa. So Mount Everest wasn't enough for you?
Oh, hi, good morning. How are you as well?
Very well, thank you. Tell us about this latest challenge.
Well, it was fantastic. This was a deep sea submersible dive. It was in the Federated States of Micronesia, so very far to get to. It was an 11-hour dive overall in a two-man submersible, 4 hours down, 3 hours bottom time, which meant this was a survey map, so it was in partnership with NOAA to map the very bottom of the Mariana Trench, which is called the Challenger Deep. And all of this data eventually goes to GEBCO, which is part of their goal to map 100% of the seabeds by 2030. Currently, as much as 80% of the seabeds globally are unmapped, if you can believe that. So we actually know more about the surface of the moon and Mars than we do about our own ocean seabeds, which is almost unbelievable when you put it in terms like that. So
Really
this is,
unbelievable. So
yeah,
to put some perspective on it, I mean, you went deeper last week than you went high when you climbed Mount Everest. You're almost 11,000 metres below sea level.
That's right. It's almost 2 kilometers deeper than Everest is tall, and sometimes people can't conceptualize that there's actually something deeper in the ocean than there is taller. Both phenomena are created by plate tectonics. So it's when these oceanic plates subduct under the continental plates, and sometimes they push the mountains higher, and sometimes they create these trenches deeper in the ocean. So they're both geological processes, but they create something different on top versus what happens in the oceans.
And you spent 3 hours down there. I mean, what's that like? What's the pressure like, for example? And did you see much life down there?
So you can see life down there, but you normally have to bait using something like mackerel. We saw that one little clip you're playing, which is called a polychaete. It's actually more of a bristleworm, which can be seen at shallower depths as well. There's no light down there, so it's extreme darkness, and the pressure is extremely high. So a lot of things that get said are 292 jumbo jets stacked one on top of another.
Wow.
It could be 8 tons or something like 16,000 pounds per square inch. So there's a lot of pressure. It's not something you could open a capsule in the same way you would never open a capsule if you were flying, in an airplane. And you hear that when you're going down. There's little creaks in the sub, and there's condensation that forms that drips down in the capsule. So sometimes it's a little bit eerie if you have a very good imagination.
One of the big things that drives you and inspires you to do lots of these challenges, because I was reading you've done, K2, you've skied to the North and the South Pole. One of your big motivations, isn't it? It's about inspiring women. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I find women are very good at endurance sports, and that's primarily because a lot of endurance sports have to do with having focus and concentration. Men sometimes can have short attention spans, nothing to the other sex, but they can get bored easily and kind of have their minds wander. Whereas women are very, very organized. They're very good at communication, and they're good at building teams and helping to sort of make decisions within those teams on a consensus basis. So their skills are a little bit different in teams and putting teams together, and that tends to gel really well on an expedition. And a lot of these things, although they look extremely physical, almost 50% or more tend to be really mental. So it's about that willpower, and it's about having that desire to complete what you've set out to do rather than the physicality of what you're doing, especially when there's things like weather and things that push you back.
Sure, sure. So what does somebody like you do once you've made a huge achievement like this and set a record? You know, do you sit back and think, OK, well, I've done K2, I've done Everest, I've done North and South Pole. Is it space next?
um, well, it's interesting. I don't know, exactly what the final frontier is. I suppose I look for next steps, whatever they are, as maybe where I can lend a voice. Or the oceans were interesting for me because they were 71% of the Earth's surface, absorb 25% of CO2. I thought this was perfect when Glasgow was becoming um, the place where we were going to have the next conference for the UN to talk about climate change. Um, our bodies are primarily water, and they didn't have a lot of representation. So I thought oceans were a good place to try to lend a voice to. And I think 50% of the NASA indicators of climate change were ocean related. So that's what drew me to oceans primarily. I don't know that I'd rush to space. I know that's popular right now. There's a lot of stuff with ISS, and there's 2 or 3 people working on different ways to get there. I'm not sure that that's 100% of interest right now.
OK, listen, Vanessa O'Brien, congratulations on becoming the first woman to reach the Earth's highest and lowest points. Really good to talk to you this morning.
Thank you so much.